Over the next 4 years, and in particular the first year of my administration, I want to test the hypotheses that are existing. We have the Peninsula Mobility Report, we have the Century 5 report, we probably have a couple other reports somewhere that have proposed ideas, but none of it's been tested yet. So let's put the bike lanes up. Let's do that. Let's do the HOV lanes. Let's do the carpooling and start to get some data as to what really works. That's something I'd like to do in my first year that'll probably carry over throughout as well. Long term, I see Charleston as a place that's going to become a lot more walker friendly and fewer cars. I do think we're going to have some sort of nascent light rail down the road. I think it's going to happen. I also see the bus system getting better with more people riding it. Right now, the bus has a bad perception. There's a tendency to associate bus riding with people who are poor and impoverished, and that's nonsense. There are a lot of people who make a lot of money who ride public transportation, but we don't market it that way. So I think down the road, it's going to become even more attractive as an option. I also think we're going to have lots of different modes of transportation because we're going to have to accommodate all of the people. And heaven forbid we have a natural disaster. No one's even talked about that. So we've got to look at incorporating many modes of transportation. So I see that both short and long term. It's something we are really going to be called to get a handle on sooner rather than later. When you look at the traffic coming up Savannah Highway in the morning going into the city of Charleston, it literally is at a crawl on occasion. And again, if something unfortunate happens, what's going to happen to all those folks? So I would rather see us have a plan in advance before we're forced to plan. I remember in the late 90s when we had those couple of hurricanes and people were stuck in Charleston on the interstate for 12 hours because the lanes didn't open. We just can't afford things like that anymore. We're just too much in the world's eye and the nation's eye not to have a better handle on it. So I think that this is a time it's really going to force us to take some action, and I think we just go for it. Well, one of the things I think is important in terms of actually fixing roads is the Chamber has a proposal to get some dollars to prepare our aging roadways, and I think that's important. I think it's something like $42 million in repairs that we need. So I would work with the Chamber around some funding for that, at least trying to gather some funding. Magwood Drive in the morning between Ashley River Road and Glen McConnell, I could cook breakfast for my girls. Sometimes it takes that long to get through there. And of course, if anything happens on I-26, forget getting to work at a decent hour. Another bad intersection is up there at Sam Rittenberg and Orangeburg on occasion, because people are trying to make that left-hand turn and they're not willing to stop when the light turns, so that has been problematic. Going back the other way, Sam Rittenberg and Ashley River going toward the city, that can be a nightmare too, but that's just a result of probably of too many lanes. But you can't reduce the lanes, so people are going to have to either slow down or with synchronized traffic signals or something on that order. I'm curious as to how many cars go through those intersections a day. I've always wondered about that. Oh, the pain. It's going to go right over my house. But I understand that it's probably going to have to happen because there's just too many folks now. Having said that, someone was sharing with me recently that there was an alternative plan that never got a lot of attention. So I would be interested to see that. I think at this point, we don't take anything off the table. But I do recognize it's probably going to have to be finished. The question is who's going to do the paying? And how quickly might that happen? So I might have a little bit of reprieve time. But I don't think we can take anything off the table at this point. I would add the ferry service between Charleston and Mount Pleasant, the waterway, the taxi. I would add that as well. I think the biking is wonderful for people who are healthy and fit. And I would encourage that. I would even look at incentivizing that in some way. And I understand that we're pretty much ready to try that. So my recommendation is let's try it and see what happens. We've got enough reports. We need to start moving now. get it going, actually figure out how we can do it, pick a day, announce it, and let people ride their bikes over the Legree, over the bridge. I have to go back, Mayor Riley, I love him. This was years ago that he started doing that. People stole the bikes. It was awful. It was embarrassing. But we need to try it again. And they were yellow. They were bright yellow, and there were places that you could leave them. And well, anyway, we just need to try that again. I think people would be more receptive this time around. I'm getting ready to do what I'm going to call my big fat bus tour, where I'm going to actually take a bus for a week and document my experiences. I think that's going to give me a lot more insight into what we can do to make CARTA more viable. It's all well and good to tell people ride and do this and that, but the reality is that's a lot tougher than we envision. And I have a 3- and a 6-year-old, so I don't know how I'm going to lug them with me, but I think it's important to actually walk through that phase. So I'm looking forward to finding out how we can make CARTA stronger. One of the things that concerns me is we have a lot of bus stops, and this is true West Ashley, where there's a sign and the road and there's a car and you, and that's it. That's dangerous. Some of these bus stops have to go back a little bit, or we build a bus shed over them. I also think we could put some Wi-Fi, put some, what do you call them, hotspots, so that people can check to see when their buses are coming. And then the challenge is the fleet is old and it's aging. We got to get some new buses from somewhere, and that's going to require federal funding. So those would be the pieces that I would look at first. Rapid transit for sure, we're going to need that. And I was thinking about MUSC, which I think has 10,000 employees. And I wonder of those 10,000, how many live in the city? Can they walk if they're not already walking? Could the rest take the bus if they're not already? Is there any way that the rest could carpool? Would they be willing to help test some of these hypotheses? That would be a good, strong data field, 10,000 people, to get a lot of information. So the rapid transit. With respect to light rail, I lived in DC and I rode Metro, and I loved Metro, but when I lived there 20 years ago, they were still talking about the Green Line to Anacostia. It was taking just that long. It's very expensive. So if the money can come, great. And I understand that there are some models floating around somewhere, but until you get the funding in place, I think it's a tough sell.